want to talk about Matthew 14. From what I heard about last week is that you realize that your life that you have here on this planet is a quite small time compared to the rest of eternity. Is that pretty much, I heard that part, right? So what you do in this little scratch of time, this little small amount of time is pretty important. This is a story from kind of one of those times where Jesus just does something miraculous and we have to sit back and wonder. But I think it'll also help us understand what our lives should be about when we're here on earth. Let me read a little bit of it. It'll be up on the screen as well. Matthew 14, verse 22. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. Understand what has just happened. He's just fed 5,000 people with a couple loaves of fish and some bread. I mean, kind of a miraculous thing already. And then he says, oh guys, hey, I'll clean up the mess. You guys go ahead and you go on and go across the lake to the other side. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves, because the wind was against it. Buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. These guys are out there trying to row from their side to the other side, and yet it seems like everything is kind of going against them. I've been there. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. I never read through that little sentence and just said, oh yeah, well obviously, he's just walking across the lake. And just, what? What is he doing? He's walking across the lake. How many of you done that? Lake Erie? Right now you can pull it off, huh? It's pretty cool. Almost the whole thing. You walk to Canada. I'd be like Jesus. Now it says when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified and thought he was a ghost. It's a ghost, they cried, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. And then Peter, who was always like this, Peter was like the older guy. You know how the disciples worked. When the time of Jesus, there was usually one disciple who was older than the rest of the group, and that would have been the lead disciple. Oftentimes Jesus Peter throws out a comment or something before the rest of them, but that was really his job. That's what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to talk about stuff ahead of time, kind of get the crowd moving. Well, he does this. He says, hey Jesus, if it's really you, I want you to call me because I'd like to come out and walk on the water with you. He's the old guy, and he wants to go do what Jesus is doing. Here's what I was thinking about as I kind of pondered the trip. Daryl and John, and I didn't convince anybody. You asked me. I didn't beg you, or I mentioned it. I said, I want to go, and you said, yes. I said, okay, cool. Without thinking about, like, okay, what is this going to be like? I just, hey, they want to come. I want to take them. Let's see what happens. I don't know if you noticed it, but they're older. They're older. Like a Peter, older. They're going to go out in front and they're going to say, hey, Jesus, I kind of want to go up and walk on the lake with you. Can you call me out? And if you know the story, Jesus says, come on. He actually invites them out of the boat. And of course, if you've ever heard of John Ortberg, he has a famous book, I think, if you want to walk on water, you have to get out of the boat. And if you've heard enough messages on this little story, it's something about quit sitting in the boat, get off your duff, get out, and start walking on the water, right? Is that kind of how you've heard this before? I had to put it into the context of these two guys, before last week, we'd only have one or two, and usually they were younger folks who had gone off into the mission field. And I thought, how cool is it that like the older guys are going to now try this first? It's not the hip, cool young people, it's the people who are really taking a risk. We got there, and Pastor Mark, who's like 30 years old, he's mothering us. Well, I want you to get to sleep. I want you to take some rest. You're older. And I was like, are you talking to me or are you talking to them? And I think he was talking to me too. It's like, I can handle this. But he said to, Brother Darrell, you're older. John, you're older. Your legs, and what's going on there? And go lay down. It's like, we're Americans, man. We can do something. We can handle this. I don't know what was going through Peter's mind when he thought, hey, Jesus, if you're walking on the water, I want to come too. Have you ever dreamed of that idea? Like you would see something that was miraculous, that doesn't seem logical. It cannot be happening, and say, well, I'm following him, so if he can do it, I should be able to do this. That's sort of what I felt like when I watched these guys at work. Darrell was in the hot sun, and he had his hat that just kind of sat on top of his head, really come down over his head, just sat there and kind of kept him sort of from being burned. But he was keeping up with these young, fit guys like Homer, who just had no body fat whatsoever. You could see his veins and all his muscles, and he's old, but man, he was just ripped. He'd do that, and he looked like Arnold. He kind of shrunk down, more like a Ninja Turtle. And I thought, I wish people could see what Darrell is doing right here, because this is unbelievable. Building relations with guys who barely speak English but can communicate. And he's working alongside of them, and the rapport was being built. This is exactly what Jesus kind of does. He leaves heaven, he comes, and he walks amongst his people, and he builds rapport, he builds relationships, and shows them that he loves them because he hangs out with them. And that was Darrell's thing. It was funny, by the time it was done, he'd be sitting on the ground clipping the little weeds and making them mulch and clipping the, I don't know what he was doing. I'm sorry. I know he had scissors in his hand and he was clipping things. And everybody was happy about it. We call that pruning. Is that pruning? He was pruning. And John said, it looks like there's a bird among the bushes. He was just sitting there. And they just thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This guy has come so far to help us, and he's doing stuff that we don't even like to do. The other thing with John, it is true that the roof over the 3 classrooms that extended over another part, like a stage, and then over like an auditorium or theater thing, the one was fixed, and we were then going to fix the second part. But these classrooms were kind of messed up because the roof had been gone in the rain and all that, so the walls were kind of gross. So they asked us to paint. Now, in that culture, the teachers who get paid very little, and teachers around here, you'll understand this, they basically pay for the paint, then they paint, or the PTA paints, but like the school never helps them at all. And so we said, well, we can do paint, and so they're thinking that we're going to give them paint and they're going to have to do it. We get to the first night and it's kind of late, we went at like 9 o'clock, and they're already painting, and we said, no, you have to teach tomorrow. You go home, we'll paint. And they just looked at us like, no, that's not how it works. We have to do this. No, go home. But they'd hang out and talk and get to know them a little bit. So John and I, the first night, Pastor Mark was there, and there were 2 pastors painting, and then John, the old guy, who kind of wobbles up and holds on and stuff, stumbles around. And I just thought, I wish people could see. Because here's what I noticed. The people who were there from the Philippines, they saw us and thought, what on earth are these people doing? I can't believe they've come this far. And they're like working. They're working when we wouldn't work. Why are they staying up till 1 o'clock to paint our buildings? So the next night, after the first night, the principal came out. A couple more teachers came out. Pastor Mark was with us, Daryl was with us, and it was like a party, and we're like chit-chat, get to know it. Pastor Mark is having spiritual dialogues with these teachers. It was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. This is just like Jesus coming down from heaven and walking amongst his people, hanging out amongst his people, getting to know them, and talking about spiritual things. Now, this is the idea of Peter saying, you know what? I have sat here long enough. I see Jesus and what he's doing, and I want to do it with him. So, hey, Jesus, if it's you, man, call me out. I'm ready to get out of my boat. And I'm going to start walking on water. And it's true. It's when this invitation comes. Jesus says, hey, come on. The invitation comes. Look, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come onto the water. And Jesus says, come. Jesus invites us, I would say, out of a comfort zone. And I would say that we've spent a lot of time in the comfort zone, right? We spend a lot of time there. And when Pat comes, he takes the cattle prodder and gets you a little bit. And I tell him to, because he can go back to the city. And you can't attack him. And you always have to drive a long way when you do that. So he gets here and goes, and it's great. You get out of your comfort zone. I think what you guys were doing was getting out of your comfort zone. And you can say that you weren't having fun, John, but I saw you. I saw you discussing things, talking to the kids, having loads of fun, smiling, even when you were hobbling around painting. It was fun because you can tell that the principal and the teachers were going, I can't believe these people have come this far to help us, to serve us, to work with us. So Peter gets out of the boat and he says, I'm coming. And here's the crazy thing. It says that while he's going, he's actually staying on top of the water. Okay, now that's quite amazing. Do you believe, as a disciple of Jesus, that if Jesus calls you out of the water, tells you to go walk on water, that you could actually walk on water? There's no way I can't do that. I'm certain of it. I mean, obviously the frozen thing, but there's no way that could happen. And that's what I think Peter eventually figures out. He's walking on water and he's going, wow, this is quite amazing. Then it hits him, oh my gosh, I am walking on water. This cannot happen, I'm sure. What? And he starts to go under. Of course, you know how Jesus describes it, how it's described. He goes down, he's out of the boat, he's walking the water toward Jesus, and then he saw the wind. He was afraid, and he began to sing, and he cries out, Lord, save me! Now, it's interesting. I mean, Jesus is just standing there watching the whole thing happen. Now, my guess is, this is for me. These guys did a great job over there. For me, on Tuesday, I was getting very irritated. I don't like when I'm not in control. Well, actually, I don't mind not being in control when I'm perfectly in control. I'm fine with it. But when all of a sudden I've lost some of it and it's been placed on somebody else and I can't get them to move faster and I'm, come on! I gotta get something accomplished here. Then I get a little lunged up. And that's when I kind of sunk about Tuesday when nothing was happening with this roof. And I began to sing. And at some point, some wise person said, didn't you tell me that when things don't happen around here, it's us learning how to be patient and relying on the Lord? And I went, shut up, John. Don't listen to what I don't have to listen to what I say. You're just supposed to. And then I thought about that. Lord, save me. And it says, immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, why did you doubt? And I think that's another part of this invitation to get out of the boat. There is a part, at least for me, when I'm out on the water and I think I'm doing fine, I realize there is nothing I can do. I can't pull this off. And I start to sing, and it's then when, thank God, I have a friend who will say, aren't you supposed to rely on Jesus at this point? I mean, here's my question, and I think this is probably the question of the day is, have you ever done anything in your life that you knew for certain that if you started it, there was no chance on God's green earth that you would accomplish it apart from the work of Jesus. Have you ever tried anything that risky, that difficult, that's so beyond your ability that you knew, unless Jesus comes through right now, I am sinking and it's going to be a colossal failure? See, if you haven't done that, I don't think you've understood living by faith. You know, like somebody said, we're supposed to live by faith, not by sight. I think most of us spend our Christian life just doing it by sight. I can pull this off. But there are times when, at least in my life, where I finally get out of the boat, and I think we experienced that. Got out of the boat, started walking, and realized this is going to be a colossal failure unless Jesus steps in. And here's the cool thing, He will. He promises to hold us up. He says, no, relax. Why did you doubt? I got you on this one. I pick you up. I'll take care of it. Just to finish up how it ends. Peter gets up. I guess they walk on the water together all the way to the boat. They climb into the boat, and the wind died down. You know, think about that for a second. I mean, he's walking on water, it's kind of miraculous. Then they get to the boat, and all this turmoil, this chaos that used to be going on, all of a sudden just, the lake is like glass. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. His disciples worshiped him. My hope really is that some of you, and I think you're doing this, you're beginning to get out of your comfort zone. You're beginning to realize that the stuff that you do in this life does matter for all eternity. And you don't have a whole lot of time. And so it's kind of not wise to just sit in the boat the whole time. And watching these guys kind of get out of the boat and going through the whole thing. Well, I was going through the whole thing. You know, by Wednesday, it felt like things had just changed for me. I was connecting with people. We were getting things started. Resources were starting to flow. We were getting this started, this house started, getting some pictures for some people, helping this person put a roof on their house, helping this ministry kind of branch out and work. I mean, it was just really, I couldn't believe how things were going by Wednesday. Almost like, no, let's give us one more day. I mean, if we could just have one more day, we get so much accomplished. Oh, no, it's okay, we'll be back in about 5 weeks. And when I said, hey, don't worry, we'll be back in 5 weeks, to people, you're kidding. You're going to come back again. You mean this isn't it? No, we're going to come back again. It's sort of like that, who's MacArthur? Douglas, yeah. We will return. Don't worry. We're going to come back. We're in this with you. And then I just stood back and worshiped God for what He was accomplishing through 3 fairly ordinary dudes and a bunch of really humble servants. My prayer is that you will think, it's time. I only got this much life to live. I think I need to get out and risk something. Risk something so large that if God doesn't come through, I'm going to sink. And when He comes through, to sit back and worship Him. Just go, wow, that's awesome. Well, we're going to remember this Jesus who gave His life for us in communion. So I'm going to ask for the ushers to come forward.